Hello, and today I'll be looking at Lingsha's current kit and seeing how good it is for break and whether she's a sizable upgrade for Gallagher, or if you should just save your jades for a different character or sustain. If you want the TLDR, she's pretty good but not leagues better than Gallagher. She may not be worth it for many players who are already satisfied with an E6 Gallagher. This video won't be edited too much as there's a lot to talk about, and with it being the version 1 kit, I can already see some changes coming, especially to the Eidolons. I assume and hope she'll get buffed, but she's already in a pretty solid place regardless. I'll need to give my experience and perspective with break so you'll understand where my critiques and analysis of her kit will be coming from. But if you don't care about this part and just want to know if the kit's worth or not, you can just skip to the timestamp on the screen. So, after using a super break team since the release of Firefly, I can safely say that Harmony Trailblazer is a must for Firefly, and honestly speaking, without Ruan Mei and only Harmony Trailblazer, she's arguably one of the worst DPSs in the game, in my opinion. But that's not the point of the video. With these two slots for a super break team essentially being permanently locked, that means there's only one slot remaining, which makes it a very contentious spot to fight for. Sustains in general aren't good enough being sustains alone, which is why Luocha and Bailu have fallen from grace. Sustains in this current meta need to provide value outside of sustaining alone, whether they grant attack, speed, crit, or whatever it is to increase the team's damage. And after passing the current sustain checklist, so for healers, healing and cleansing, and preservation with their shield and CC resist, what else can the characters provide? That's the big question. So, for this last slot, I have tried Asta, Gallagher, and Bronya extensively for Firefly, and as such ideally would want a combination of any of their traits for Lingsha. For this supposed Gallagher upgrade, there are in my opinion 4 things we're looking for. 1. Teammate action advance. This is super important as our break DPS delete the toughness bar significantly and deal incredible damage. As such, the more times they go, the better. This is why we see Boot Hill paired with Bronya. 2. The next would have been a team break efficiency buff. This did not have to rival Ruan Mei's 50%, as 25% or something like that would have been just fine. My main inclusion for this comes from 2 parts. A, it would have made her more unique and provide more value to any type of team, not just break. And B, this would greatly help break, for example, as a Firefly cannot kill the common enemies to the side if they aren't fire weak, which is a really big issue in pure fiction. This isn't mentioning the damage either. 3. A significant team speed buff. After using Asta and Dance, I found myself being able to get away without a sustain and get really good results in all 3 of the endgame modes. And lastly, 4. Delete the enemy toughness bar. If our sustain can delete the said bar, this allows our break characters to deal break damage without wasting time on a toughness bar. But if you've seen and read the kit, it's clear that we're not getting 1, 2, or 3. Getting any of those 3 could have easily made our top tier universal sustain, if not the best. And getting a combination of any of those 3, it would be a pipe dream, but one could imagine. As such, we're left with the last point, deleting the enemy's toughness bar. And guess what? That's what Gallagher does too. Because of this, she will be directly competing with Gallagher in this respect, with Gallagher also being an SP printer. So the question arises, is she worth replacing Gallagher? But firstly, let's give a rundown of her kit before comparing it to the other characters. First and foremost, she is an attack scaling healer which has break effect conversion to attack and healing bonus. Her main gimmick will be her new summon and a follow-up attack, Fuyun, which attacks all enemies while healing teammates. With that out the way, let's get to her actual kit, starting with her basic. Her basic is just like any other and isn't too significant, but her trait Sylvain Smoke grants an additional 10 energy for the basic, now generating as much as her skill. The toughness damage is also in line with every other basic, dealing 10. Her skill deals damage to all enemies and heals teammates for a certain amount. Thankfully for a person on Reddit, we can see her healing values here, and you can decide if it's a lot for you or not. This deals the same toughness damage as her basic, that being 10, but now for all enemies, and as such ranging from 10 to 50 toughness damage. This is pretty good, but I can't think of too many situations where this is impactful for a character like Firefly. 10 toughness isn't too much, and with Firefly being able to instantly break common fire at weak enemies, this really won't help much there. The main thing to note is that this action advances her summon by 20%. So let's talk about our summon. Lingsha's talent summons Fuyun via skill or technique, which has an initial speed of 80 and an initial action count of 3, with every skill adding 3, with it being capped out at 5. After which it deals damage to all enemies, cleansing 1 debuff from each ally and healing. This is paired with her Trace Ember's Echo, which is like an emergency heal that Luocha has, but when you're under or equals 60%, with Fu Yuan immediately launching a follow-up attack. This can be triggered after 2 turns just like Luocha. So what does this part mean? Well, let's start with Fu Yuan's speed. 80 is pretty slow with it matching Numby's speed with Topaz. For more reference, Jingyuan's Lightning Lord starts with 60, excluding the ult's 100% action events which I have not gotten to yet. Assuming you use your technique to summon Fu Yuan right off the start of the battle, I believe you should be able to get 1 Fu Yuan action if you don't ult, 2 if you do, and 3 if you instantly or if you reach below 60% HP, which with Firefly occurs when she skills outside of combustion state. But realistically, you will be only getting around 2 actions without Firefly and 3 with. It's pretty good. Now, what does the initial action count mean? Unlike Lightning Lord, where it gains more speed per stack, or Numby, which gains action advance, we have this action count. This just means how many times Fu Yuan acts before you have to summon it again via skill. Unfortunately, there is no increased speed or action advance for the summon for these action counts, which means that the ult and skill is super important to make Fu Yuan not take a year to attack the enemies. Fu Yuan's toughness damage value is at 15, so more than a basic but less than most AoE ults like Jingyuan, Herda, Peita, Himiko, etc. This honestly is just pretty good as well. Remember, because Lingsha is directly competing with Gallagher, both with 98 speed, being fire, having a break focus support kit, abundance, and as well having break vulnerability in their kit, which I'll get to soon. As such, depending on how much she breaks, will honestly determine if she's worth it or not for most people. Let me explain her ult and light cone before getting the Gallagher comparison for toughness damage. Her 110 cost ult, which is just like Gallagher's, inflicts a state on enemies which increases break damage taken by 25%. This works exactly the same way as Gallagher's Basada state, which increases break damage by 12%. It also advances Fu Yuan's action by 100%, which is really important. This would segue to her light cone. Her light cone increases break effect by 60 and can increase enemy vulnerability by 10 or 80 if the wearer has enough break. If you really wanted, you can pull this light cone for Gallagher if you really don't want Lingsha, as it'll be an 18% team damage increase for the most part, which is pretty huge. This also makes Gallagher even more useful outside of a break team like Acheron or Ratio with that extra debuff. While making this video, I was going off the assumption that her follow-up attack generated 5 energy, but it doesn't. Like, why? If this was the case, her best light cone would have been post-op conversation.
Nice to meet you. I'm Natasha, an underworld doctor. Feeling sick?
And not her signature in my opinion. With post-op and an ER planar, she could have 2-turn ulted, which honestly could have made her really good for breaking. Unfortunately, it doesn't generate any energy, and if it did, this would have allowed her to 2-turn ult. And I honestly would think going for an E1 and running post-op would have been meta and much better than Gallagher. She does, however, have a 3-turn ult with any combination of skill or basic, though you will need an ER row. But regardless, she generally is really SP positive. Also, here's her break conversion talent, which I won't talk about too much because it's not that important in my opinion. So let me make a quick chart comparing her and Gallagher. As you can see, pretty similar, not gonna lie. Now, for the important part, how much do they delete the toughness bar? Let's do a scenario against 3 fire weak targets and see how much they can chunk the toughness bar in cycle 0. My Gallagher will be using post-op conversation, which lets me do a basic into ult rather than skill into ult. But doing a basic to ult to enhance basic, and lastly a basic, adding E6 and its break efficiency, it deals 132 toughness damage. Now, what about Lingsha? From likely Elio's gameplay, which I'll link, we can do a skill into Fu Yuan, into skill into ult, and Fu Yuan acts again. This will deal 210 toughness damage. This is quite a sizable increase to break as opposed to Gallagher. But from this, we can get that in single target, Gallagher is pretty equal in breaking, but once we get to multiple enemies, this is where Lingsha can potentially start to shine. If you were to get her E1, of course, she'd be a lot better than Gallagher, but it's really up to you if you want to get to that point. I think Lingsha is definitely a nice upgrade, but not make or break for break teams. I think in Pride Win terms, she comfortably sits with the likes of Fu Xuan, Huo, and Gallagher. But for my personal opinion, she's pretty okay. She performs well in regards to breaking for multiple enemies, but the issue is, any common enemies already will instantly get deleted by our current premium break units. And while she would be nice in theory in pure fiction, due to how super break works, with it being much better in single target, it actually doesn't do a lot of damage in pure fiction if you were to break all 5 enemies with her. You can try this right now with Gallagher, Harmony Trailblazer, and Ruame if you really wanted. So if you really don't care for a decent Gallagher upgrade, then you don't need a pull. I'm probably gonna get her Lycone and put on Gallagher, but who knows, maybe that'll change. Future you here, my plans were actually foiled. I got Ho-Ho's Lycone super early. It was at 30 pity, but you know, I'm using it on Gallagher now, so hell yeah. Back to the video. I think if you could consume more of these action counts and have higher toughness damage, I think it will make it much more worth to pull. I want to say if you like her kit and character, by all means pull for her. I'm not saying she's bad at all. I just personally don't think I'll benefit too much from getting her though, as I already have an E6 Gallagher. I'll quickly talk about her Eidolons to note. Her E1 is really good. Again, we don't have any cool mechanics like speed, action advance, or break efficiency, so our current sustain just needs to be able to delete the toughness bar, which her E1 would allow. This would sizably increase her toughness break and would 100% make her worth getting over Gallagher, but at that point, you're comparing 2 5-stars to an E6 4-star. The defense shred honestly isn't too impactful, but is nice nonetheless. With no defense shred on the team, going from 0 to 20 is just a 12% damage increase if the enemy is broken. This is really similar to E2 Ruan-Mei actually, and not E1. But if you had E1 Ruan-Mei with 20 defense shred, so going from 20 to 40, it would be a 15% damage increase for your team. Her E2 actually is pretty bad right now, as 40 break effect in a break team is actually not a lot. With a Firefly which already has around say 500 break, if not more, adding an additional 40% would only increase her damage by around like 6%, which is actually even worse than her E1. As such, I believe 2 things will occur. This E2 most likely is a placeholder right now and they'll change it to something much stronger, or they may switch this with the E1, which would kinda suck, and maybe change it too. And that's that. I may make more videos going over Lingsha again if there's any significant changes to her kit, or perhaps a video on some of the other characters' kits if you'll like. Just let me know in the comments and I may do it. I'll keep you updated with a post or something. But regardless, thanks for watching and peace.